Actually, the cyber cab story was not nearly as interesting to me as the Optimus story for Tesla, because we don't really have the dystopian future of the automated cars, but we do with the anthropomorphized robots. And watching these robots serve drinks, come up with jokes on their own, um, people inherently treating it like a sentient human being, or like they
Mm.
wanted it to be a sentient human being, to me feels like the montage of the apocalypse movie. And I wanted it. Like, I wanted it to continue. Like, I'm not there saying, let's slow this down. I watch the robots walk around and I go, yeah, I need two of those things. And where can I sign up on layaway to get one of these robots? You said you watched or that you at least saw the coverage of the Robot event. Did the Optimus robot itself hit you in any particular way?
Yeah, I thought it's cool. I mean, it immediately reminded me of the Will Smith movie I, Robot, and
Right.
I mean, that was the whole point. I know that was part of the theme. They kind of played into that with the We Robot theme. It's very Isaac Asimov. It's very science fiction, but it's now reality, or science nonfiction, if you will. That's awesome. I mean, it's a very cool idea. And obviously, in certain types of environments, this really can make a difference in people's lives. But my mind goes to the dangers of it pretty quickly. I start thinking of the lessons that were made in that movie and what happens when you give robots autonomy and things like that. But I think the other part of it was just from a practical sense. What are you going to use this for that makes the cost worth it? Like, that was the more interesting question in my mind. Why would I purchase something like this? I think I would probably sooner lease it. I could see labor applications at home. Maybe you have a project you're working on at home, some kind of, construction work, or you're remodeling a room, or maybe you just want to repaint a room. I'd rather lease one of these than own one outright for all these daily tasks that are better completed by all of the members of my house, right? Like, I didn't see an immediate need that could justify the cost. What are your thoughts?
It's so funny because I don't really, even though I have the idea of, oh, I like to have my own robot. That's just really a novelty thing.
Right.
To me, it's more about the deflationary effects of these robots within the labor force.
Mm.
And there is that whole thing of, the beginning of the industrialized revolution caused the displacement and poverty on a scale that we hadn't seen before.
Right.
But those are birthing pains to a new world, and I don't know really anybody, myself included, who says, "Hey, we should go back to an 80% agrarian lifestyle." Right? So we seem to be okay with this progress forward, and so the my big concern has been, especially for the last few years, the population decline. In Canada, it's the same as the United States. There's just not enough kids being born to replace the adults, like at the rate that we want it to be. And when we're seeing these sorts of things, the slower growth rate in population in other countries, Singapore I think is below 1 at the moment. That's a ticking time bomb for either the culture disappearing within, let's say, 50 years, and um, the nation perhaps not being able to support itself. Like, you need the children to be productive and there in order to take place. And what was always at the back of my mind, like, do I tell my kids they should leave when they're older and go to a different country? Because I was like, what's going to be here if there's not enough people?
Hmm.
Well, the robots help solve that problem. The robots and the AI, it allows for a type of a productivity boost that won't take 20 to 40 years. Like, if it's real, it won't take 20 to 40 years for it to kick in. And then we have the productivity within the labor force that we desperately want, that's infinitely scalable, right?
Well, not infinitely, right?
Well, theoretically,
Sure.
that well, what do you mean not infinitely? If you have the software and the hardware, what do you mean?
Like, I can imagine that statement applying to the software aspect of this, but we still have the production cost that goes into creating these robots over time. You can scale only so much, only so far as there is supply to actually meet demand, and then some, right? But like, the how many people are you really displacing? How many jobs are you displacing in that process, and how many can actually be created to displace those needs? My point is, like, it's not something that can scale forever. Eventually, there's going to be a supply demand problem there.
would that be imagining that we would need the same amount of material to build the robots as we are doing right now? Because I would imagine that that then scales as the robots become more, let's say, stronger or more durable, or what have you. You can use less and less material in order to make it, and they would be able to be able to do more and more and more. And I ultimately envision the point. It's sort of like how uh, landlines were replaced with satellites. All of a sudden, now we had far more range of access for our signals than what the wire across land can do, even though we were accomplishing the same goal of communication. So I just imagine that 50 years from now, well, the fifth generation of this doesn't look anything like a metal robot walking around. That it's some other material. Hell, it could be grown for all we know. And then, but we're never going to we're not going to want to walk back from the automation, this labor automation. And so the amount of productivity that we can get out of it, I'm assuming, is this trend towards this deflationary effect of increase in productivity. Um, and that should bring down prices for everything dramatically.
Hmm.
Like that to me is so exciting. The idea that we could possibly be on the cusp of a golden age that could last for hundreds of years if we get this right.
Yeah, I think so. I've heard similar arguments made if you had, let's say, like the Star Trek type replicator, right? Where if you could start printing your own food, printing your own materials at home in a way that made it easier to access those resources, or in your example here, you're allowing robots to create more robots using resources that are grown, right? Using some kind of like biometals or bio something, right? I'm not completely well versed in that realm, but let's just say it's some kind of resource that could be renewed in some way. That totally makes sense. The question I have after that though is really around cost, because at least the proposed price that they were mentioning is somewhere between $20,000 and $30,000, which means that what you're really doing is replacing what could be done by a human with somebody who costs potentially 33 or 50% less than bringing somebody on staff to be your assistant throughout the day, right? So if you're imagining this world in which costs come down, and that might be true if that labor, of course, is available at a unit economic cost that is significantly lower than the current cost of labor. And so those costs would need to come down quite a bit for that to be possible.
Well, if these robots were coming and there was no need for it, let's say we had a population boom, right? Another baby boomer generation, then I would say I think it's a failure to launch. We're not really going to have the need to meet the technology, but
Yeah, you make a good point about the population problem. And I
yeah.
know that's like a serious concern. So, like replacing people in the future, the missing people that we need in the labor force with robots is a really interesting concept for sure.
Yeah, so I'm really excited about that, and it actually gave me hope because
That we
you
can
know,
solve the population problem with
e
robots.
exactly,
Yeah,
exactly.
I
It
like
it
it.
it gave me the same sort of hope as when, you hear these, I forget the field, but in biology, AI generating, cures and or treatments for,
Mm,
uh, chronic diseases and ailments that we didn't have before, right? The AlphaFold with the protein folding that we can now generate different types of, things that we need in order to help our bodies. I'm like, that used to be 200 years away, and now it's, like, here. Right? And so that to me, I just feel like, okay, great power, but the possibilities that are in front of us, it's ours to fail. And I go, well, if we fail, if we blow ourselves off, if we let the AI take us over or whatever it is, fine. Like it was gonna happen. We're not on track to or I accept that as a possibility as an outcome. But with that comes also the possibility of unbelievable gains, and you can't have one without the other. The whole yin yang thing.
fair.
Yeah.
Fascinating to see. As always, Elon is pushing the envelope.